Well, good morning and welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. Wednesdays are a time where we discuss various things. I usually have a PowerPoint or I'll have a whiteboard, but we are still trying to recover from some things in the spring, the snowpocalypse, icepocalypse, whatever it is that you want to call that. We haven't got that set back up yet. So I'll stick with the PowerPoint today, and we're going to talk about it in that way. Hey, thank you for joining me on this Wednesday, as we're going to talk about today the differences between Kings and Chronicles. You all have been, if you're in the reading plan with us that you can find at fbccrowley.org, click on the link button. You can find a reading plan there. There's a couple different reading plans. One is a general reading plan that is 5 readings a week. It'll take you through most of the scripture. And then there's another reading plan of every thing in the Bible. That's a 6-day-a-week reading plan. But if you're in the 5-day-a-week, as many are, this year we're reading Chronicles. Last year we read Kings. And there is so much similarity between the two that it was just necessary. I felt it was necessary. Read Kings one year, read Chronicles one year, because there is just a lot of similarity between the two, which raises the question, what really is the difference between the two? And so I want to talk about that today. First of all, I want to share with you that the book of Kings was written after the beginning of the captivity in Babylon, while Chronicles was written after the return or close to the return from Babylon and Persia. This is the exile period that happens with Israel, or Judah specifically. Israel would be taken into captivity first to Assyria. Judah then would be taken in captivity the next century by Babylon. And so you've got the split kingdom. Now, if you recall, a little biblical history here, if you recall that under Saul and David and Solomon, there was a united kingdom. There was Israel. It was one complete country. After Solomon, it split between the northern and the southern kingdom. The northern kingdom was called Israel, and the southern kingdom was called Judah. So you have the northern, or Israel, falling to Syria, southern Judah later falling to Babylon. So with 1st and 2nd Samuel, this shares with us all about Saul and David's reign. But when you get to Kings, then you're going to see things differently. And it begins to show a lot of different kings. But the way that it's structured is different. And so, first of all, the time frame. Kings was written at the beginning. So you're going to find throughout Kings a lot of blame. We're here because this king, and what you'll find in Kings oftentimes is they'll state the king, they'll state how long he reigned, and then it'll say he either followed the ways of David or he didn't follow the ways of David. He either followed the laws of God or he didn't follow the laws of God. Kings is very clear about that. Chronicles is different because Kings was written when they were going into exile. They were mad, they were complaining, they were frustrated, obviously so. Chronicles, however, written by Ezra, most likely Ezra, Chronicles was written as they were leaving exile. And so there was much more about hope and restoration. And so you have Kings written from one perspective and Chronicles written from another perspective. Kings was compiled by a prophet, and you will see much about Elijah and Elisha in Kings, but you don't see that in Chronicles. The book of Chronicles was compiled by a priest. As I said, it was Ezra, the chronicler, as they will call him. Yes, the namesake of the book of Ezra, a contemporary of Nehemiah. So you have a difference. You have it compiled by a prophet that basically is looking back and showing them, okay, look at your history, look at all the things that happened. No wonder you're in exile. This is why. This king, this king, this king. You know, your northern king, your southern king. All these things, they were horrible. They were bad people. Oh, but you had some good ones here and there. They tried to restore. But mostly it was to show reasons why you're in exile. While the Chronicles, written by a priest later in the exile, was much more redemptive, restorative, and a little more hopeful in nature. They will not. They'll overlook some things, not because it was right or wrong. They just are focusing in a different way. Now, imagine reading all four Gospels. When you read all four Gospels, you get a different view of Jesus depending on which one you read. It's all Jesus, and it's all the same, and it's all truth, but you can just get a different view of who Jesus is. Kings and Chronicles is the same. It's a different way to view that portion of history. The emphasis of the book of Kings is earthly. The emphasis of the book of Chronicles is more heavenly. And again, prophetic versus priestly. This makes sense. The Kings just wants to tell you all the nitty gritty. Here's the good, the bad, the ugly. Chronicles wants to take you on a journey to get you to understand the hope and the restoration. You've got restorative nature at the end of Second Chronicles. You don't have that in Kings. And it's just because of the way that it was written and when it was written. Kings has both Israel and Judah as the theme in the book of Kings. Chronicles, though, Judah is the main theme. And again, Israel was carted off to exile 100 and some odd years before you would get to Judah. And so when Judah exiles, they have separated themselves from Israel. In fact, when they come back, the Judeans, those of Judah, the southern kingdom, for anybody that would intermingle or intermarry with an Israelite would then be called Samaritans. And you know how well those are regarded as you move into the New Testament. This is how bad it really got. But Judah is the main theme of the book of Chronicles. And so you're going to see a focus on all of the southern kings because they're in exile. They're coming out of exile. And the focus at that point is Judah. They have more or less forgotten and they've disregarded and disembodied themselves from Israel, the northern kingdom, and will not unify again. Kings, the history of the book of the Kings, it's political, and the focus is on the kings. But the history of the book of Chronicles is ecclesiastical. It's really a different kind of focus. You have a focus on the priests or on the priestly nature of the kings because it was the king and priest. Yes, you had a high priest. Yes, you had a whole series of priests. But the king had played a lot of role in the leadership in that area. And so here's just a difference in the way that it was written. The book of Kings closes as they go into bondage. I mentioned this in a foreign land, but Chronicles closes with restoration from the foreign oppressors. And so, again, here's just a small difference between the two. Basically, those are the main differences between these two books. They're both informative, but it's very easy on just the overview of it. If you were to read both, you would get the feeling these things they're the same book. Why do I have Kings and Chronicles? Why do I have these two things? Well, there are enough differences that it helps us get a picture and a view of that time frame. And one other thing I might mention, the 5 major prophets and the 12 minor prophets in the back end of the Old Testament, they overlay onto that. And I know many people can get confused by this. And you start reading Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, and it's like linear history. You get it, Joshua, Judges, linear history. 1st and 2nd Samuel, linear history. You read the Kings and or the Chronicles, and you understand linear history. Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, linear history. Then you get the wisdom in the middle. But then you get all these prophets at the back end, and you're like, okay, this is complicated because they jump back and forth. You got 8th century prophets, 7th century prophets. You got prophets at the exile, in the exile, coming out of the exile. What in the world's going on? All of those prophets, those 17 books that close out the Old Testament, overlay all of the Kings and the Chronicles. And so we have to understand that they mix in. Something that might be of interest is if you are reading through Kings or Chronicles and you run across one of those minor prophet names, go read it, and then come back and continue in your Chronicles. There is a style of Bible called the chronological Bible. I don't recommend it for the faint of heart. It can be a little complicated. It can be a little repetitive. But the idea of the chronological Bible is it overlays the Psalms, because those are written by David, and oftentimes David would write a psalm based upon an experience that he was having. You remember when David and Bathsheba, he lost his child, he had sinned, he had a problem, Nathan called him on it. Psalm 32 and Psalm 51 are written as a result of that. So when you're reading 1 Samuel 11 in that area, you need to, or 2 Samuel 11, you need to go back and read Psalm 32 and 51, because it's a part of that process. It's a part of what's going on when David's hiding out in the cave running from Saul. There's some psalms written as a result of that. But then you get into Kings and Chronicles, and they got this mixture of different prophets that are speaking into the lives of the kings, and those are written down later. They're just not intermingled. The chronological Bible puts all those things together, and it does help if you want to have some linear approach to it, but it can get a little tedious to walk through that. So just be aware. But I just wanted you to understand a little bit of the difference between Kings and Chronicles today. I hope you guys have a great Wednesday. We're going to have Dads with Coffee tomorrow, and we will see you then. Again, if you have any questions or anything, feel free to post those or message me, and we'll answer those on Talk It Out Tuesdays. We have a brand new series that's starting this Sunday called One Faith to Lead Them All, as we walk through Hebrews chapter 11 and begin to explore the idea of faith in reality. What does it mean? How do I walk by faith? What are some examples of those that did, and what does that mean for my life? I'm excited to share this series with you. We'll open that up this Sunday, and we'll walk through that throughout our fall together. So you guys have a great day. Don't forget prayer meeting tonight at 6, choir practice after that. Have a great day.